Alright, hi guys. We're gonna do our first video here. So I'm gonna put my screen up. We're gonna do a reading lesson. This is gonna be about genres, which are. We'll talk about them. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And there we go. Hopefully you can see this. Let's start with what a genre is. So a genre is a style or a type of music, literature, movies, or other media. In this case, since we're talking about reading, we're only going to talk about the literature portion of it, which is anything that's written. So the two major types of genres in literature are fiction and nonfiction, and then there are categories underneath both of those. So we're going to start with some types of fiction. So these are a couple of books that are fiction. We have Because of Winn-Dixie, Aesop's Fables, Where the Sidewalk Ends, and Who Was Johnny Appleseed? So those are some fiction, but let's talk about some specific types of fiction first. So the first one is fantasy. Fantasy are stories including elements that are impossible, such as talking animals or magical powers. They usually start in the real world but go to a magical world. So some key examples here are Harry Potter, definitely a fantasy one. Then we have The Wizard of Oz, which starts in the real world, and then Dorothy goes through that hurricane and ends up in Oz. Another good example would be The Magic Tree House, where the two kids get to travel all kinds of places. That doesn't really happen in real life, so it's fantasy. Another example is science fiction. I personally like science fiction stuff. I think it's really cool. But it's a type of fiction that uses futuristic technology like aliens, flying saucers, and flying cars. So a good example of this is The Voyage of the Space Beagle. I'm trying to think of another good example. Not entirely sure. That's alright though. But it's something that you get. It definitely uses futuristic things within the stories, and it doesn't really make a ton of sense because it's futuristic. Next one is realistic fiction. So these are stories using made-up characters, but that could happen in real life. It just doesn't. So the Dork Diaries is realistic fiction. So is the Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Ramona Quimby, age 8, The Tale of Despero. Anything that could be happening in real life, but it's just a made-up story about characters, is realistic fiction. So something like Junie B. Jones is realistic fiction. It's a story about a child's life and all the trouble she gets into. Could really be happening, but it's just not. The next one is historical fiction. This one is a fictional story that takes place in a particular time period, usually in the past because it's history. So Sarah, Plain and Tall is historical fiction. Little House in the Big Woods is historical fiction. A lot of you guys read the I Survived books. Those are historical fiction because it's historical events like the Titanic sinking. What else do they do? World War II type of things and stuff like that. It's all historical, but it's made up events that portray the real fiction history behind things. Oops. And I think this might be the last one. Nope, not yet. Mystery is another type of fiction because it's a story that has some puzzling events and uses clues to solve the event. There's detectives usually, but usually it's not completely true. These are made-up mysteries. They're super fun. So things like that are Nate the Great and the Hungry Book Club, A to Z Mysteries, The Lucky Lottery. I really liked Encyclopedia Brown when I was growing up. That was a fun one. Another type of fiction is folktale, legends, tall tales, and myths. So these are all within the same realm. They're stories that are passed on from one group to another in history. So the Greek myths. Paul Bunyan is another one. The story of King Arthur and his knights. Any sort of folktale that you hear is folktales, legends, all of those things. But it's all fiction. And not the last one yet, poetry. It's another thing. It's a collection of words that express emotion or an idea, sometimes follows a rhythm. So a good one of my favorites is Shel Silverstein, Where the Sidewalk Ends. He has a lot of really good stuff. This one is Take Me Out of the Bathtub and Other Silly Dilly Songs. So poetry is a type of fiction because it's typically written in, like, it's not real things that are being written, not facts. Sorry, that was my dog. Next one is fables. These ones have a moral to the story. A lot of what we read in class where we talk about something having a theme and a moral to the story is going to be a fable. And they often have animal characters. Aesop's fables are definitely the most talked about ones. Fairy tales, Disney, all of those things. It's a simple story about magical creatures. Fairy tales are all over the place. You got the Three Little Pigs, Little Red Riding Hood, Goldilocks, things like that. And then we have nonfiction, which is the opposite of fiction. So fiction is fake. Nonfiction is not fake. These are true things. They give all kinds of facts and things like that. So the first type of nonfiction is just generic nonfiction. It's written to give information and is usually made up of facts. So you have all kinds of facts in this one about trains, all kinds of facts about weather in this other one, but it's giving you straight up information about the topic it's describing. Next one is a biography. Biographies are a story of a famous person that are written by someone else. So who is Jane Goodall was written by someone else, but it's about a specific person. So she did not write it herself. Same with this one. Who is Walt Disney? It's all about Walt Disney, all kinds of facts and everything about him, but it's written by someone else, not by him. So a biography is not written by the person, but it is about them. The next one is an autobiography. This time, it's a story about a famous person that they wrote themselves. So Rosa Parks, she didn't give up her bus seat during the civil rights era, and it created a whole civil rights movement to help African Americans get the rights they have right now. And she wrote a book about her experiences, which makes it an autobiography. It's about herself, and she actually wrote it. Other people that have autobiographies, I think Michelle Obama has one. A lot of people have autobiographies. We'd have to look more into it. I think that's it. That's the end of our slideshow. So those are some fiction and nonfiction. Let's look at this anchor chart really quick. So here we have fiction. The types of fiction, which we just talked about, are science fiction, also called sci-fi, realistic fiction, historical fiction, fairy tales, myths, mystery, horror, folk tales, fantasy, all those types of things. What to look for when you're reading fiction: it always has a plot. So you start with your exposition and your conflict. You have events called your rising actions that lead to the climax of your story, which is the really big pivotal point where the whole story comes to a head. And then you have the ending, which is called, what is it called? The falling actions. Sorry, the falling actions are the events kind of leading to the end, and then the resolution right here is where everything gets resolved. So you always have a plot in fiction. And then there's always going to be a setting. Where is it taking place? Is it in New York City? Is it in a country? Is it in space? There's going to be a setting. Then you're going to have characters. So who is the story about? Right? Then there's usually going to be a theme, which is kind of the message of the story, like money can't buy happiness. What did he say? Love finds a way. Things like that. Okay, then we have nonfiction. Remember, this is where it's not real. So what you're looking for, the text features that you're looking for, you're going to see titles, dates, lots of photos, maps. There's usually a table of contents telling you where to look. There's headings, an index, illustrations, charts about the facts, captions to go along with the photos, lots of graphs that go along with the information that's being given. So the types of nonfiction that you're going to see are argumentative, which means that they're arguing for a point, biographies, informational, personal narrative, and persuasive. So those are, I'm going to stop. Those are just a few of the genres. Tomorrow, as part of your reading assignment, I'm going to have you guys try and identify some genres. So make sure you go back to this video if you need it. I'll put up those, like the anchor charts that we just talked about so that you can kind of see those. But yeah, that is the end of this video.